So, Mr. Chair, you do have quorum. You have 3 members present. You can proceed with the meeting when you wish.
Okay, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our virtual meeting for governance and council operation. I will begin this morning's meeting from the clerk calling a roll of attendance.
Members of the committee, I will call your name. Please indicate your presence. I do not see Councillor Dillon present. Councillor Williams?
Yes, I'm here.
I do not see Councillor Medeiros present. Councillor Visante?
Present.
Thank you. And Chair Fortini, so you have 3 members present, Mr. Chair. You can proceed.
Okay, thank you so much. So our next item is approval of the agenda. Does anyone want to add any business to today's meeting? If so, please use the chat function. Mr. Clerk, oh, I see the chat function on the side. So,
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
okay, seeing no one. So moving on to, so we have a motion by Councillor Williams to approve today's agenda. Okay, instead of seeking a recorded vote of this item, so I will ask for anyone to oppose a motion or otherwise your vote will be counted in the affirmative. No objection, that carries. We'll move on to 3. Does any member have declaration of plenary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act concerning on today's agenda? Mr. Clerk, I don't see any, so seek that as note. That's today's minutes. Okay, so we'll move on to 8.1. This item is a discussion or can be approved by the council motion. Okay, so this is the motion here regarding 8.1. We could bring this one forward. It's for mayors and council expense policies. Are we having a presentation of this, Mr. Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no. I think staff are available if there's any questions.
So I think I wanted to ask some questions on this one.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members can ask questions, yes.
Okay, so I just want to ask, so this, on the expense policies, is this going to be carried on for the next term, the same?
Through the chair, right now, the policy is expected to be reopened as of December 1st, 2022. So at the end of next year, the policy will be revisited and opened up again, and that's mentioned, I believe, in section on page 21 of the report. The next scheduled review is for December 1st, 2022.
Okay. And so I know we have an expense budget. Are we getting any expenses back from any COVID for the next term? Or we don't know that yet?
Through the chair, not yet. I think we'll perform that assessment similar to last year when we start preparing the annual statement of remuneration. So not yet, Councillor.
So do we know if it'll be coming around January or we have to wait?
Yeah, I'd say in the new year, once we kind of review everything and look at everything, then similar to the exercise performed last year, Councillor.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm done with my... Councillor Vicente, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to staff for doing all of this work. I know it's an ongoing process, updates quite frequently. I guess the question I have is, where are we at currently? We're 3 years into a 4-year term. In terms of council expense adherence, are all members of council within the limits of their expense accounts?
Through the chair, yes, I believe so. I believe there was a motion as part of the annual statement of remuneration earlier in the year where the mayor had gone over, but that was approved by council back in, I'm going to say March.
Yes,
other than that, to my knowledge, no council member has gone above the allocated budget.
Okay. Now this report is coming to committee and council for final approval, correct?
Through the chair, yes, I believe through the minutes of today's governance committee meeting, yes. It'll go to committee of council for approval.
Now, when would we expect to see a summary? Do we see a summary of all members of council, what their budget is and where they have spent up to so far? Do we see that on a yearly basis? Or only by reviewing the material online, do we have the ability to see that on a member-by-member basis?
Through
Sorry, go ahead.
through the chair, if you wouldn't mind, I can answer that. Through the chair to Councilor Vincente. That information is included in the monthly reported that's posted on the city's external website. So there is a summary for each year in the existing term, where each member stands with respect to their budgets.
Right. Can we, and I think this would be timely as we look to approve this new policy, it would be timely if we just had come back to council with this, just a one-page summary showing the balances for each, limit and balance.
Through the chair to Councilor Vicente, absolutely. We can have that information for next week, I guess.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Vincente. One quick question. Don't we have this on the website updated every 3 months already?
Through the chair to Councilor Martini, yes, it is actually posted on a monthly basis. However, it is included into each individual member's report and not as a summary. So we can definitely provide a summary.
Okay, great. So it's every month. I thought it was updated every 3 months. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no more speakers, I have a motion by Councilor Vincente to approve the staff recommendation report, and then the report, the mayor's and council expense policy update, and the governance and the council operation committee meeting for November 26th to be received. Is there anyone opposed to this motion, or otherwise it will be counted in the affirmative? Mr. Clerk, seeing none, thank you, no objection, the motion carries. So we'll go on to 9.1. This is a discussion that I think we had from under new business about street and park naming discussion. So I think I brought this forward that we're putting in a lot of parks and naming all over the place, and I think we were bringing this back for discussion. So do any members have any comments? Please use the chat function, please, on the speakers list. Councillor Williams, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Through the chair to staff, with regards to the street naming process and the list of streets that will be, or the list of names that will be applied to new streets, is that information posted on the website so that residents can know where the name is on the list?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if it is approved by council, then to either add to them in the event of a street name, in the event of a new street name to be added to the master list of street names, if it's approved by council. The master list, to my knowledge, is not published online, but that's something we are looking at with planning staff. If it is a new request that has come in through the portal for a submission from the public to propose a new name, it will not be, we don't have a running list of submissions available on the website at this point. When we do report back to council after the appropriate consultation, it is addressed in the report, and if it is approved, then it is published on the street and park naming website for the public consultation period. So if you're asking whether or not new requests that have come in through the pipeline that haven't been processed yet or in the process of being reviewed, is there a running list? The answer is no, not at this time.
Okay, I had the question asked of me when a certain street name was going to be applied, and I didn't have an answer for that. So I think for our residents who are interested in a particular name and such, if it would be able to be public so that we know, and how many names do we have so far that is on the list waiting, and that would also kind of help us determine how many years down the line we are for some of these names that have been put forward this term of council.
So through you, Mr. Chair, in terms of names that are added to the master list of street names, I believe there are hundreds, if not probably I'd say several hundred. The allocation of those street names is left to planning and the development interests when plans of subdivision and new streets are put in place. And knowing that Brampton is, within the next probably 10, 15 years, getting close to relative build-out with subdivisions, it's presuming that it could take several years for some of those names to be allocated, if they're allocated at all. To date, since 2019, I did a bit of looking on the weekend. There have been 62 name requests that have come in since 2019, since the start of this term. And 28 of those are for streets, and 25 are for parks, and 9 are for other facility assets. For example, the Bob Callahan Senior Center, Susan Fennell Sportsplex, things like that. So 28 street name requests have come in, and to your earlier question, if it's the wish of committee, we can start to put a supplementary list on our website that shows the names that have come in that have not yet been processed.
I think that would be helpful. And then that way we kind of have an idea, where we're at and how long it will take. And if we keep adding to the list, then, because I did hear you say if they do, or if any of them do get posted or used, that's a bit of a concern. And then also it might address that concern that some people have about some names jumping the list. And, if we're jumping the list and requiring a park or a location or a street to be named before some of these names on the list get posted up, that does kind of raise some concerns. And so I think it would be helpful. And if that's, do you need a motion forward for that, or is that just something that can be taken as direction?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we can just take that and we can just put the submitted names on a supplementary list that's on our website of names that have been received but not yet processed.
Okay, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Councillor Williams. Speaking, I agree with Councillor Williams. We should have a list and show where they are. But my concern was more start naming parks and streets. And I look at other cities. Usually they do that after someone, not mostly subdivision and parks, someone that did something or accomplished for the city. I know Mississauga will not name any facilities unless someone passes away. So they have certain rules. Maybe we could look at that in the future. So, Councillor Williams, will you move the recommendation report?
Yes, I'm happy to.
Okay, moved by Councillor Williams. Any objection? Seeing none. So 9.2, this is another discussion that we were talking about last time about the members in town hall meetings. Mr. Clerk, so I got some councillors complaining when, the mayor goes to certain events, they're not invited into certain areas, or they have town halls and the area councillors are not there. So we have a protocol, I think, last term. Usually when the events are taken in that certain area, the area councillor should always be invited. And so do we have any of that still, or was it changed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps I'll start. There was some discussion last term at council regarding, community or councillor-led group events and the participation from members of council. And there was discussion about, having at least 2 or more members participate when there are town halls. Again, mostly because of the dual representation governance system that we have in effect. So there are 2 councillors representing the same constituents. So it would make sense that both councillors would have some involvement. Maybe one councillor takes the lead, but both councillors are at least aware of what's going on in their wards, particularly when there are corporate resources given in terms of supporting some of those community-led or councillor initiatives. There was a request for a report back on a town hall protocol, but I cannot find any direction or report back that actually occurred last term. I do wish to, though, just the principles that we already have in place in our current policies. We do have a council staff relations policy, and in that policy it does speak to the notion that, if information does come into the corporation from a councillor or from the public, when there is information that's provided back, it should be provided, in most cases, to both councillors, where it affects their ward, so they're aware. And, you could extend that principle in terms of town halls. Now, with the advent of, unfortunately, of COVID, town halls, to my knowledge, have been virtual, if anything, and most of those town halls to date have been sort of corporate-led events, teletown halls and things like that, which I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, Councillor Fortini, or something more community or informal led by a councillor.
Yeah, and that's what, I remember last term, we were allowed to have 2 town halls per year because, we don't want to take staff's time up every weekend or every night going out to town halls from all 10 councillors. And both councillors had to be involved in the town halls when staff are there, or else staff should not be there. If we start doing each one their own town halls, as many as we want, it's going to take a lot of time for staff, and that's not fair to them. So that's one discussion I wanted to have, both councils should be involved. On the corporate emails or anything, the other thing is if it's one councillor or both councillors are copied on the emails, yes, I agree, both councillors should be followed up by staff. But if there's only one councillor on the email, that means it was from a resident, then it should only go to that councillor. I know that's what we do at the region. They're asking us not to share emails, but I understand both councils should be informed because sometimes, but copying them on the email is one thing, but copying back and forth is another. So I don't want to have something coming to me, let's say, we reply back from staff, and then all of a sudden, boom, it goes back to Councillor Williams, and staff is back at it again. So it's good to know that both, they know what's going on. So that was the other discussion. But the town halls, I understand that a lot of them are virtual, but we had last term, they were allowed 2 town halls, and both councils have to be informed, or city staff would not be there. That's one's concerning. I got 2 councils complaining that town halls have been happening, and they're going to events in their areas, and they're not informed. And I remember last term we had a policy, so that's why I was worried about this term. That's all. Is that clear enough, Mr. Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I see Jason has put a comment in about maybe
Yeah.
commenting on this.
Go ahead, Jason.
Thanks, Councillor. I'm just looking through the chair, just looking back. So in 2017, Council approved kind of a 3-tier model. This was prior to my time, but it's a report entitled Communication Support for Community Matters. And essentially there's 3 types of events given consideration to. One is entirely city-led. So let's say the COVID-19 teletown halls that we've been doing, those are city-led, kind of run by the city with council participation as they wish. Then there's a second tier of events that are city-related and would be in a way joint. So that could be things like councillors wishing to hold a budget town hall in their wards, but the budget at large is a annual staff-driven, council-approved process. And so there's kind of that hybrid model in the middle for things that council's already approved. I'd say things like term of council priorities and reports and initiatives council's already approved. And then there's the third type, which would be more councillor-driven, councillor-led for ward-relevant subject matter that may not be applicable for all staff or for all councillors. It might be more ward-specific. And for those, what communications has supported council with is kind of a templated event in a box type support, whereby IT and communications have a template style, and councillors have, in general, I wouldn't say every time, but in general, been providing between the pair a joint date, time, and that's put into kind of a standardized marketing design. So we provide those to the councillors to promote the events themselves. And then generally what's happening is if it's city subject matter, the councillors and pair staff are contacting those departments themselves to kind of line up which staff might speak, and that's kind of contingent on those staff's availability. So the councillors and staff would kind of arrange what works for them. Now, that said, I haven't found that to be too onerous yet. Obviously, if numbers change and a ward pair wanted to start doing 3 of these a month, I think we'd have to have a conversation about the resources being dedicated. At this point, it hasn't been a challenge, so just kind of we've been operating in that fashion. But I can recirculate that report from 2017, and I believe there's also a report in 2020 from this committee as well.
Okay, yeah, and no, I don't want 3 a month. That's too much time for staff. And I do agree. Like, I remember last time we were allowed 2 or 3 town halls a year. But now it's all virtual, so it's a little bit different. But no, having 2 or 3 of that. The other thing is that the complaints were mostly on communication. Is that some of the councilors mentioned to me last week that was about, when the communications or phone calls are done, it's all about one person is the bearer, not about the area councilors in the area, like the neighborhood nurturing. We did the videos and stuff, and it's only like it was only promoted a certain area. So, but the town halls, my thing is mostly the town halls and emails, and I believe that staff doesn't have to run around back and forth. So, having a couple a year, it doesn't hurt. So that's I wanted to. So we'll wait when you bring that we'll have the next meeting and bring it forward, like you said, 2021, and we'll look at that one. Does that fine, Jason?
Sorry, councillor, so are you asking for a new
No.
report or just to follow the previously approved policy?
Well, I like to follow the previous policy that we adopted. We don't really want a new report. We already said that we only have 7, 8 months to election. We don't want to start changing things now. No, whatever was approved in 2020, that's
Okay.
what we should carry on. That's my suggestion. I don't see no other councillors on the board, so thank you. So
Thanks, councillor.
I have a motion by Councillor Williams to approve the staff report. Anyone opposed to this motion? Seeing none, motion carries. Mr. Clerk, we have the discussion for in-person, 9.3, in-person remote meetings in council. I'm going to leave that to you to give a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to springboard off what the mayor had mentioned last week at Committee of Council and what regional councillors have seen from the regional clerk in terms of their approach moving forward for regional meetings. What we are proposing at this point in time, and there will be formal communication coming out to all members of council, is continue the current practice until the end of the year, which is no public in the in-person meetings, public participating remotely. Members of council are strongly encouraged not to attend and can participate remotely. If 1 or 2 councillors do wish to attend a meeting in person, I would say that we probably have a hybrid meeting in effect right now. When you think of council meetings, Mayor Brown is present, some senior staff are present, the clerk's office is present, IT and AV support are present. So we do have, in effect, a hybrid meeting that we are supporting for council meetings. From now until the end of the year, we'll say the public attendance will be restricted. Senior staff attendance will be restricted, subject to approvals from the CAO and or the department heads. If a few members of council, and I say a few, wish to attend in person, as long as we have appropriate physical distancing, we can accommodate that. Starting with the new year, as of January 4th, as the mayor had indicated last week, we will move towards what we call more of a hybrid model, where assuming public health orders and guidance is still in effect and there are no further restrictions, we can accommodate up to 5 members of council or committee, as the case may be, in attendance at a meeting. And that's taking the 11-seat council seating area in the chambers and having the chair at his or her seat and then 2 members flanking on either side, spaced out to ensure that there's appropriate social distancing. We will be recommending and requiring that masks be worn in chambers when members are not speaking, and we have the physical distancing in effect. What we will do is we will ask, and this will be part of the formal communication, if a member, one of the 5 members wants to attend a meeting in person, they're to notify the clerk no later than 4:30 the day before the meeting, so we can ensure that we can accommodate that member of council that wishes to attend the meeting. If more than 5 members wish to attend, we will look at a rotation. So we'll do that for the foreseeable future in January until we get some sense that we can open things up a little more. And that may be sooner in January or maybe later in January. We can't predict that at this point. The other thing is in regards to seating. So we will do the best that we can to accommodate members, if up to 5 members wish to attend in person starting in January in meetings, in their seat. But knowing we have assigned seating, we may have to adjust that. So I'll use the example, if Councillor Vicente and Councillor Santos both wish to attend, they sit next to each other, but one of those members we will have to space out in another member's seat, which we can accommodate in the chambers and reprogram the system to ensure that the appropriate distancing is in effect. So depending on which members wish to attend a meeting in person, we will try to get them in their assigned seating, but that may not always be the case. We were also asking that all members that participate, whether in person or continue to participate remotely, continue to use their laptops to join or device to join the session. One, because in a hybrid meeting approach, we are going to continue to have the necessity, I guess, to accommodate the public, staff, and members of council who are participating remotely. So to do that, we need, in the case of public meetings, the WebEx session, so we can see the chat function, so members can add their name to the list, as the request to speak system in the chambers is not integrated with the WebEx session. And in the case of closed session, we'll join the team session, whether in person or not, so they, again, can raise their hand if they wish to speak. Any recorded votes, we will not use the recorded vote system in the chambers, as it requires in-person attendance, and we will anticipate still having members participating remotely, so it will continue to be a verbal recorded vote as long as we have a hybrid meeting in effect. Once we do get back to full in-person meetings, we will go back to the equipment and technology that is available in the chambers to facilitate recorded votes, request to speak, and those things. In terms of public attendance, we are looking at, again, opening it up to some limited public attendance in January, and we expect the same for staff. In terms of advisory committees, we probably will be looking at opening those up in the new year as well for possible in-person attendance. One of the issues we need to sort out with that is citizen appointees are generally considered to be volunteers. And in so doing, in accordance with our administrative directive, we do require to verify their vaccination status before they can attend a meeting in person. We also are looking at we wanted to minimize the amount of plexiglass barriers between member seats because, one, there isn't enough real estate compared to other municipal council chambers, the region, City of Mississauga, to put that in effect. But we are looking at plexiglass barriers, perhaps for the speaker's podium, where when the public can come back in and they do wish to come forward to address council or committee, as the case may be, there is a level of protection there. So, Mr. Chair, that's in a very summary fashion what we're looking at. That will be spelled out in a formal communication to members of council in terms of the return to chambers model. I will also say that because we are doing live streaming of all meetings, we will only be able to have the capability through live streaming from the chambers. So advisory committees and other committees, we will run those meetings effectively from the chamber itself, as opposed to another committee room that may be located in City Hall or the West Tower, or the committee room on the 4th floor, where at this point we don't have the capability to broadcast from that space. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair, if there are any.
Yeah, very clear and very good. I was just hoping that we could put plexiglass in between every councillor and have everyone in, because if we get 7 or 8 want to come in, how are we going to start rotating? Is there any other room maybe that all councillors could come in and maybe put them where the audience sit, move them around, or maybe make 2 rows, put them behind where you were saying, put maybe 3 there and 5 in the front? We can look at that too, but I'll leave it up to staff. I got Councillor Williams on the board. Thank you. Councillor Williams?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Peter. That's a great update, and many of the questions that I had written down, you've been able to answer. I just have a question about the in-camera space. If we have that many counselors coming, the in-camera space, will that also accommodate for the number of counselors who are intending to be in that room as well? I guess that's my first question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, good question, Councillor Williams, and yes, we've done the math and sort of the spacing, and as you can appreciate and recall the size of the committee room and the number of seats, we can accommodate probably up to the 11 members with spacing around that table. So members would be, if you can visualize what that table in that room looks like, members would be participating almost all the way around that whole table. What that might mean is staff participating in closed session. Some may have to actually wait outside to be called in for the particular item, and we may have to limit the amount of staff that are in the room as well to maintain physical distancing. So certainly up to 5 members of council or committee, we can accommodate easily within that committee room, and we can accommodate up to 11, but it will have severe restrictions for the number of staff that are in the room at the same time.
Okay, great. Thanks. My next question is to the residents that may want to attend. I believe as it is now, they have to register online. And if they register online, the number that is allowed in the chambers, has that increased since the last requirements, or is that still limited? I think it was only limited about 10 people in the chambers in the auditorium there. Does that increase? Also, and if they want to register, how will they know if the registration is full? And is it possible to have like a count on the website so that residents know whether they are going to be on a wait list, or if they're if the space is able to accommodate them?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Williams. So in terms of public attendance, we do have a registration system that is available on our meetings and agendas page. We are strongly encouraging residents to continue to participate remotely at the time being. Our current capacity in the chambers, and I should say, first of all, that the capacity limits for meeting spaces have effectively been lifted through the Reopening Ontario staged reopening. It was at one point, I think it was 10, at one point it was 25, and then 50. So it's effectively been lifted, but we still have to have separation, physical distancing. So as I look out at the chambers right now, we have reserved seating and spaces for approximately 18 people to sit in the gallery. And as you know, that's probably a 15% of the entire gallery in terms of accommodating the public. So what we could do is we could, when we do go back to the possibility of public coming back in person starting in January, we'll monitor that number in terms of people that request to come in. We do have provisions on the registration system that says that they'll be contacted by the clerk's office to confirm if they can attend, because depending on how many members, how many staff are in attendance and physical distancing and separation, while we may have 18 or 20 members of the public requesting to attend, we may or may not be able to accommodate that, just given the number of other members and staff that are participating. In terms of having sort of a counter on the system in terms of active requests, I can ask IT about that. I suspect that's probably it's probably more complex than it may seem, and I guess whether or not we want to have that on there for the hopefully the limited time that we'll have this in effect in 2022, we'll see. But I can make that inquiry. So the other thing to consider is, and Councillor Chair Fortini raised this earlier, looking at other options to accommodate more than 5 members in the chamber. We are looking at the back row where I'm sitting right now, and we can accommodate 4 additional members there, so that gets us to 9. And then the other option is looking at what we call the corporate leadership team, senior staff row, and that may be something to look at as well.
Your mic's done. Councillor Dillon, your mic. Sorry, Pierre, go ahead.
That's okay. So we're looking at another option for that, for accommodating the remaining 2 members there. That's not a preferred approach, to be quite honest, because the members are then sitting with their back to the public that may be in the gallery. And so we may be looking at the possibility of accommodating other temporary desks in the back row here. That's something that we're looking at.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, if we could, if it is possible, I know it is only going to be for a limited time, but just so that residents know that there might be still an opportunity for them to attend, if they were to attend in person, it would be kind of good for them to know. But if you're contacting all the residents anyway, to let them know if it's a possibility, then that might suffice. But thanks. I don't have any further questions. I think it's really good that we're taking these measures and that we are still encouraging residents to participate virtually until we have a good sense of how many people can be in the gallery to be able to participate. It seems like, and actually, if you can confirm this, have we had like an increase in participation since we've been doing this online? It feels like that we've opened up the opportunity for more people to get involved, but you know, it's great that we are doing this. And then after, will we continue with the hybrid model for residents who want to participate virtually, or is this going to stop after we've had all of our all of these precautions and everything, after everything's lifted? That's my final question.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the procedure bylaw was amended last year by council to say that the remote participation for meetings would continue for up to a year after the end of the state of emergency, and the state of emergency by the province and by the municipality. We are still in a state of emergency declaration for the municipality. I believe the provincial one has been lifted. So whenever the municipal one is lifted, we would continue with the ability for what we call hybrid meetings, so both remote and in-person participation for up to a year, and then council can make a decision after that by resolution only if they wish to continue or not. The Municipal Act was amended during the pandemic by the provincial government to allow municipalities to enable remote meetings as a permanent fixture if municipal councils wish to do that. So that opportunity is there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councilor West. I have a Councilor Bowman ask, will all councilor, when we come in, have to be fully vaccinated or show proof? Mr. Clerk?
So through you, Mr. Chair, currently the administrative directive for vaccination applies to staff and volunteers and contractors employed or engaged by the city. It does not apply to members of council. So right now there is no requirement, as I understand it, for members of council walking into a meeting in person to provide a proof of vaccination. The presumption is with our current administrative directive is all staff that are participating in meetings and coming into the chambers and coming to work per se are vaccinated or have the appropriate COVID negative test in accordance with our policy. But there is no requirement at this point for members of council.
Okay, well, Councilor Bowman got his answer. I'm just hoping that everyone should be coming back in, you know, maybe we could do. The in-camera, I know that you say maybe there's not much room. Can that be done right in the council chamber like the region does?
Through you,
There's
Mr.
no
Chair,
room on the
yes.
other side?
It's a good question. Yes, we can. We can. The short answer is yes. I don't want to say the concern. The question is there are a lot of entry points to the chambers, and we've talked about this when the chamber was renovated, is about running closed session out of here. It is possible, there's no question. We may have to have people at the entry points to ensure that nobody inadvertently walks into the session, but it is possible.
Yeah, okay, great. And I remember that. So Councilor Williams will move the motion for the presentation. Seeing any objections? Seeing none, we'll carry on to 10.1. This is a report from 2020 municipal election update. Mr. Clerk, it's all yours.
So, Mr. Chair, this was a report on one of 3 reports that was at Committee of Council last week. This report is on the use of corporate resources. There were some questions that the mayor had raised, and therein, committee referred this to today's Governance and Council Operations Committee meeting. So the report is here. The report is recommending an update to the use of corporate resources policy, which many municipalities have in effect, and effectively, I guess, it implements what's in the Municipal Elections Act, which says that a municipality cannot make a contribution to a campaign, a municipal campaign. And it also does say that by May 1st, in an election year, a municipality must pass a policy in regards to the use of corporate resources. So this is a policy that was first established several elections ago, was used generally in the 2018 election, and was updated by council in 2019, I believe it was. And we've recommended some additional amendments in this policy, and it also reflects some of the conversation that occurred at a council workshop held at the end of September. Myself and Shanika Hans are lead for the municipal election, and Shauna Danton are present should there be any questions that members have regarding the proposed policy.
Yeah, I remember the discussion. I just, feel, like I understand us councillors cannot use our Facebook or Twitter, but I have my own. And it's not fair that, I'm giving you an example, someone else has taken all kinds of pictures with a city and then decides to run, and they're allowed to use and we can't. So, I understand if it's a corporate account, but if it's my own Twitter or Facebook account, I don't see what the problem is, because other ones are using. I'll give you another example. Some other councillors that decided to run that lost their elections, they're using their past accounts with all kinds of pictures. So it makes it unfair for also us. I like to keep it fair. So I don't know we'll see what happens when you bring the presentation back to council in May. I do got Councillor Williams on the board.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Fortini, through you. So I read through the report, and I do appreciate some of the new recommendations that have been put forward to us. I do have a question around the personal page, and I know that there are some instances where we are able to use our personal Instagram accounts. I, for example, have an Instagram account that is personal, but I do post information from the city so that residents are aware of what's going on. But I may change the wording that's used, or just kind of give it a different context. So are there disclaimers that we may be able to put on during the election period to make it clear that these aren't being posted from a corporate device and aren't being posted by our staff and such? Is there some of those recommendations or disclaimers that can be added to the policy so that it's clear in case anybody has any questions on whether or not we are being truthful and how these postings are being made?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll start, and perhaps Shanika Hans, our election lead, may want to speak in a moment and supplement what I'm saying. Based on the council workshop we had at the end of September, and the way the policy is currently devised, as it exists today before this proposed policy, it basically takes an approach of you shall not do this, you can't have both. What we've done now in this proposed policy is we've said the onus is on the elected official and or the candidate, if an elected official is running for nomination for a municipal election, that they must ensure there's a clear distinction in their use of social media, in their capacity as an elected official and capacity as a candidate for campaign purposes. And what we're saying is if they use social media, and we're not saying which social media, for campaigning, it must not be created or supported by city resources, which includes staff, hardware, things like that. So if a member is using their own personal time, their own personal device, and they're using a social media account for, that may be a campaign account, that may be fine. We do also say that there should be some labeling on there that says that this is a campaign account only, and if they also do have a elected officials account for some of their elected officials business, they can say refer to that account for that business, and vice versa. So that is something we're looking at, but it really, the responsibility and onus is on the individual member in terms of their use of social media, respecting the principles of the policy in terms of a municipality cannot make a contribution to a campaign. So yes, some labeling can occur on social media accounts to, one, clarify what this account's purpose is being used for, and two, to refer to another account if there is another campaign account in the case of an elected official account, or from an elected official account to a campaign account.
So if it is, that, and that's for blanket for the account, but what about for the post itself? So if I'm posting a workshop that's happening with this at the city, and I want to say to, residents of Brampton, it's just really important information, attend this workshop. In that post in particular, should I be putting some kind of disclaimer on that post?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if that's information that's in the public domain, public realm, that there's a workshop that's being scheduled, that the city's running, it's fair for anybody to broadcast that and make people aware of that. Whether it's through a retweet or a repost or something like that, just to share that basic information. So there aren't any restrictions on candidates, whether it's an incumbent member of council or a candidate from the community, of reposting city information that's already out in the public domain.
Okay, so this is good to know. And is this report going to, if we adopt these recommendations, does that mean this report gets ratified next week in council?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if committee wishes to proceed with the report recommendations, which are on the screen, then the recommendations, possibly the minutes, but certainly the recommendations from today's committee meeting will be presented to council on Wednesday, on 2 days from now, for ratification.
Well, okay, so if that's the case, to the chair, I would like to defer this report to the next governance, just so that councillors have a good chance of reviewing clearly, and then putting forward any kind of recommendations to the next governance meeting. When will that governance meeting be? And is that within the timeline of when this needs to be completed in time for the next election?
February.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the next governance committee meeting is February 28th, 2022. So I will say, the Municipal Elections Act says that this policy must be in place by effectively May 1st, which is nominations start, which they open, I think May 1st is a Sunday, so they open on a Monday, May 2nd. There is work that has to be done to make sure that this policy, in whatever form council adopts, is ready to be incorporated into candidate information packages, published on the web, things like that. So if an option is maybe if committee wishes to defer it to either the February 28th meeting, or I'd suggest possibly a special meeting of this committee that could be held before that. I'm just mindful of the timelines, and I don't want to be in a situation where we don't have an updated policy and we have to have this information ready for candidates come May 2nd.
Okay.
Well, sorry, Councillor. So can we have a special council meeting on this on December, maybe, Peter? Would that be a work for Councillor Williams and all of us? But I just want to remind all councillors, we mentioned this, actually, Peter, you did a presentation of this at the beginning of the elections, elderly, about having 2 different accounts and how we have to do everything. And we went through this last term, the same thing. Am I correct?
That's correct. We did have a workshop
Yeah.
and information sessions for members of council on the use of corporate resources. And we do plan on having another one in the new year, but also one generally for the public that may be interested in running for elected office, so they understand what they're signing up for.
Okay, so can we call maybe a meeting for what Councillor Williams said, maybe in December? That way it gives you time. Just to speak on this. And we can have maybe all the other councillors on this too. I don't.
So through you, Mr. Chair, that may be a possibility if committee wishes to go there. Another option may be referring it to the Committee of Council, which is next scheduled to meet on, well, December 1st will probably be a busy agenda, but then there is the first meeting in January 17th.
Councillor Williams, does that work?
Yep, that works. January is a good plan for a committee of council, just to allow us to really kind of, figure out if this is the way it's written and the way it's worded is what we're really looking for. So I'm happy to move that deferral to the next committee of council.
Okay, great. Yeah. I just want to remind everyone that I remember at the beginning of the term before even, as we got sworn in, Peter did a presentation on this. And to make sure all our counts are separated, so we don't go through this, and I remember last term we went through this. Councilor Vicente, you're on the board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. In going over this policy, I guess my overall thinking is that whatever the rules are, it's important that everyone who is involved in the election understands that the rules apply equally to every single candidate, including members who are seeking re-election. And I think that that's important because I've seen in the past sometimes where candidates are told, for example, oh, you can't stand in this public area because you're running for office. And there is this misconception that that rule applies to them because they're candidates in the election, and that it does not apply to elected members of council who may also be seeking re-election. And there's this suggestion that the process is not fair, and that of course is not the case because these rules apply to everyone. Would that be correct, Mr. Clerk? That
is correct. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
So my next question then comes under the concept of enforcement. And as I read this, Mr. Clerk, through you, Chair, I get the sense that there's no stick that anyone has to really ensure that everyone is following the rules as closely as possible. What more power can we give to the clerk's office to address non-compliance?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Good question. I think this has come up before. So yeah, there isn't a heavy stick in terms of enforcement. And what we have found in the past is many times speaking to a candidate, speaking to a supporter in terms of whether, let's say hypothetically, they're handing out flyers at inside a city facility when that's prohibited. That usually does address the issue, so they cease and desist. We've issued cease and desist letters in the past when candidates are inappropriately using city logos and resources as part of their campaign literature. If there is, and the other thing is the public perception, and we can't do anything about this, but the media may or may not pick up some of these issues or complaints if they do arise, and sometimes the public airing of that tends to help in terms of resolving the issue. But there isn't a specific stick that the clerk's office has, that the clerk has. There is, a notional provision in the Municipal Elections Act that a person can take a candidate to court effectively, but that's an onerous process and probably not very likely given any allegations of inappropriate conduct or anything like that. There isn't a lot. I don't have we can take these 5 steps and get this resolved, and we can't issue a fine. We can't do any of that.
That's under the current system. Are these powers that can be granted to you, or is there a way?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if the Municipal Elections Act would speaks to that specifically, or the Municipal Act for that matter, because we would have to be very precise on what those enforcement provisions could be. You cannot disqualify a candidate. There is no provisions in the Municipal Election Act that allows for that for repeated or complaints or findings of inappropriate conduct. So none of that kind of significant enforcement or penalty exists and can be conferred on the clerk that I'm aware of under the legislation.
Okay, and thank you, Clerk. Through you, Chair. I guess it's very much understood by me and most of us that an election really is an event a very important event within the community. All members are expected to conduct themselves honorably and fairly. And yes, it's true. I think you're right, Mr. Clerk, that the community may see activity with suspicion, if you will, if they become aware of it. For myself, I have no issue with any of these rules. I am comfortable now that there is a clear understanding of what is a city resourced social media channel and what is a privately owned and under the control of candidates in terms of their social media. Social media, of course, is relatively new, but I think everyone has a clear understanding of what is appropriate and what is not allowed. And I think that, you know, if you're not using city resources, if you're not using images that were acquired using resources by the city, and it's your own channel, and you are presenting yourself by name only and not by your previous position before the writ was dropped, I think that is all acceptable, and I believe that is encapsulated in this policy, and so I am happy with the policy as it is written now, but if members wish to provide more time, I will support that as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and I agree with you, Councillor Vicente. We had a workshop, and we were told this at the beginning of the term, and we also had the workshop last term we had all this time to do the separations and stuff. So I'm going to agree with it, but there's Councillor Williams, you'd still like to defer this move it up to January 17th?
Yes, I would like to. Thank you.
Okay. So anyone opposed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, sorry, just a correction. This would be a referral because it's referring to another decision body, so refer to the January 17th Committee of Council.
Yeah, and that's what I was just going to say. Yep. So January 17th. Are you okay with that, Councillor Williams?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, that's moved by Councillor Williams. Anyone opposed? Seeing none? It carries. So we'll move on to Councillor question period. Does any member have any questions regarding today's meeting? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, is there any questions from the public?
There are none, Mr. Chair.
So we'll go to adjournment. So it's next committee scheduled to meet on Monday, February 28th at 9:30. I have a motion by Councillor Vicente to adjourn today's meeting. Anyone opposed? Seeing one, please stay safe, stay healthy, get vaccinated, practice social distancing. Thank you to Mr. Clerk and everyone.